Okay, everybody, we may as well kick off. As I said, that we will get a recording, and we know that people, not everybody can make it on time. I just want to say, firstly, at 180 Markets, today is a seminal day, and it's always great to see a story with a company where it's doing good for the world and healthcare, and at the same time, profitable for shareholders. So it really is a double benefit. It helps the wallet and helps our heart, Dion, so to speak. And with that, obviously, everybody, the big news of the day is Echosolv AS is receiving FDA approval. And we're here today with Chief Commercial Officer Dion Steinman, and we're going to talk all about what it means and also, importantly, next steps as we get into the US market. And there was another big news announcement this morning, if in case anybody did not see there, the announcement of a US-based CEO, Dustin Haynes, who comes from Gilead. And for those of you that don't know, Gilead, a multi-billion-dollar company, absolutely fantastic place, and EchoIQ is definitely in good hands. And with that, Dion, welcome.
Thank you so much, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Dion, as I said, we've been following the company for a long time now. Today is a seminal day, but maybe just back up for a second and just tell us a little bit about Echosolv AS, its stenosis treatment, and what does it mean?
Okay, so essentially what Echosolv is we've trained artificial intelligence to help interpret the outcomes of an echocardiogram. So an echocardiogram is the number one diagnostic tool when there's any heart condition that they suspect there may be a condition. And that's just, and you all would have seen this, it's quite common in pregnancy when they run, the sonographer runs it over the belly. This is the same on the heart. So that's an echocardiogram. And what we then do is we take all those measurement data and we interpret that for the cardiologist. And the reason we do that is there's so many different variables that it's often easy to overlook something. And with the AI interpreting it, it's always a consistent measurement. So we don't replace a cardiologist in any way, shape, or form. But what we do is we enhance what they do when they do the interpretation. And so that's what Echosolv does, or the company does. And the first condition we're looking at is aortic stenosis, which is a huge condition. And the consequences of that is death. If you don't treat it, it's a really bad outcome. And so that's what we do. And then obviously up until now, it's all been clinical validation. It's been running the studies to make sure we can prove that the technology does what it says it does. And finally, we can now say that the FDA has cleared us, which is the best external validation you can get, right? A regulatory body like the FDA saying that it's been approved. It's a pretty big milestone for the business.
Right.
And so what that means for your listeners, sorry, Greg, for your listeners, what that means is up until now, we've been preparing for this, right? So we've now officially got, if I put it in layman's terms, a fishing license. Up until now, we've bought the fishing poles, we've got all the bait, we know where the good fishing spots are. But if we didn't have a license, we've now got a license to commercialize that, which is a really big opportunity. A lot of work required in that, but we're now legit and official.
Right. And speaking of commercialization, and as investors, it's all about the future. Maybe take us through what are the next 12 months of the business could look like. So it really is a seminal change, including, and maybe it's a point to talk about the new CEO.
Yes. Okay. So it's a huge change for the business, right? This is one of the first milestones. It's a very important one. So what it means from an investor perspective is that the product has been de-risked technically. So there's no technical risk of the product anymore. So now it's about commercialization. So the question is, how will we commercialize this? So our main approach for commercialization is through reimbursement. So reimbursement is where the insurers will pay to use the product, or for their members to use the technology. And then what we've got set up with the hospitals is a revenue share agreement. So I'm going to use round numbers for this example. But let's say we get $50 reimbursement for aortic stenosis. The hospital group will retain 75% of that, and EchoIQ will retain 25%. So it becomes, instead of the hospital paying for the technology, they're actually generating revenue from using the technology, which makes it a really low, a frictionless sale, right?
Right.
And so that's what we're doing. So we've really streamlined the approach for reimbursement. It's a fairly long procedure or process. you can't submit before you've got an FDA clearance. So now that we've got
Right.
clearance, all of the dossier preparation, all of that work in the background has been done. We're not starting today; it's all been done. So we've submitted our application for reimbursement.
Right. And for people that are not aware, getting reimbursement from the insurers in the US is absolutely critical to any type of commercial success. It really doesn't matter how good your product is, unless you have that, you will never make any money. Now, Dion, also maybe tell us a little bit about Dustin Haynes, because this is a major change.
It's a major change. Dustin is I'm actually quite fortunate that I know Dustin from a previous role as well. So
Okay.
I've had the privilege of working with Dustin. He really is a top-notch CEO and an industry veteran in this space, right? His whole focus is on commercialization. So he comes from a very good pedigree. He's worked in this industry for 25 plus years. The
Yes.
last role that he had was with Gilead Sciences, $1.2 billion. His portfolio alone, $1.2 billion that he oversaw over multiple countries and multiple jurisdictions. And his superpower is commercialization.
Yes.
He's really good at removing distractions, which early stage companies like ourselves can fall victim of, right? There's a number of new things you can go and approach. He's really good at keeping a team focused on commercialization and execution. So I'm very excited with the announcement that he's joining, and I think so should our shareholders be. His track record has been proven, right? So he's a
Yeah.
known entity from that perspective.
For sure. And Dion, just to get into the weeds a little bit more, is the theory to go after big hospital groups per se, and then narrow it down? That way they become, you can, I suppose, get more leverage that way?
Yeah, so our approach is actually we're only going to select states in the beginning, right? We aren't going to all the states across the US. So the
Right.
one hospital groups to be focusing on to start off with are the hospitals where they do valve implants. So not every hospital does that. So
Right.
we focused on all the hospitals where they do the valve transplants, because it's obviously a no-brainer for those hospitals in terms of there's good ROI for them.
Right.
So that's the ones that we're focusing on. Then the secondary hospitals that we're focusing on are the feeder hospitals who actually don't do the procedures, but they do the actual screening and they feed the main hospitals, right? So that they are focus areas. We've got 4 hospitals that have signed up already at this stage.
Right.
And just to be clear, so that I'm not saying something that I shouldn't be saying, these hospitals aren't paying for the technology. So now that we've FDA cleared, as of today, they can start using the technology.
Right.
They're using it free of charge until such time as we get reimbursement, and then they use it. And the thought process behind that is we want to get them comfortable with the
Of
technology,
course.
we get them playing with it, experiencing it, seeing what the benefits are. And then when it becomes time to reimbursement, it's just a flick of a switch at our side, and the reimbursement happens at their end.
Right. And on those reimbursements, have you, I assume, engaged with the US consultant to make sure that you're registered properly?
Correct. So we've got a very experienced reimbursement consultant that's guiding us through this. This has been going for 12 months at least in the background, right? Because
Okay.
we're anticipating this in the background. So you have to do what's called you do a letter of medical necessity. So we've had cardiologists in the US who've used our technology actually on our behalf, write a letter of medical necessity.
Right.
All that's in place. They will be speaking to the insurers on our behalf as well. Because the key thing to keep in mind is with reimbursement, it's not a blanket reimbursement that goes across the country in a single day. So what you have to do is you've got to get a single insurer, and then you've got to show utilization. And if you can show enough utilization over a period of time, they give you a national code. But in the beginning, you get what's called
Yes.
an interim code, and that's what we're going after. The hospitals groups that we are working with are large enough hospitals that if they embrace the technology, we will get good utilization enough so to be able to justify a national code.
Great. Yeah, Dean, I want to foreshadow a little bit here about what are the potentials, because right now we're going over after aortic stenosis, but that's
Mhm.
not the end game for EchoIQ, is it?
No, it's the beginning. Aortic stenosis is the beginning, right? So, and I also want to be clear, aortic stenosis by itself is a big enough product to sustain the company.
Yeah,
And that's a fact, right? But there's more conditions that our AI can identify. And the second one that we're going after, and it's been announced to the market already, is heart failure.
right,
So heart failure is a much larger condition than aortic stenosis. And I'll give you two reasons. So one of it is just by sheer volume, the number of
right,
people with heart failure is more. And then the other thing is with aortic stenosis, the intervention is typically a valve. That's what you
right,
get. There's no real medication. That's a valve. With heart failure, though, there's a number of medical interventions. So there's ACE inhibitors, there's beta blockers, there's a whole number of SGLT2 inhibitors that you can take. So, and there's about 4 new drugs that will be released in the next 2 to 3 years for heart failure. So it's a very hotly contested market. But the problem is exactly the same as aortic stenosis. The diagnosis of heart failure is not always easy. So
right,
we help with helping find more patients. And the earlier you can find these patients, the earlier you can intervene, the better the outcomes are for the patient. And that's what we really focused on. We want to make a difference in the patient's lives, but you can only make that if you can find them. And that's where we really help the doctors, right? So heart failure is substantially bigger. So I'll give you the other reason why it's so much bigger. Currently, the predicate for reimbursement for aortic stenosis is around $68.
right,
For heart failure, it's $284. So it's a much, much bigger number. And the reason why that number is so much bigger is in the US, the hospitals pay penalties if a patient go to a hospital and they get readmitted for whatever reason within 30 days. It's called a
right,
30-day readmission rate, right? They get penalties on that. Now, the 30-day readmission rate for heart failure is 20%.
right.
So they
It's pretty
want to
high.
find these patients, which is huge, right? They want to find these patients and make sure they can intervene early, put them on the right. They refer to this as guideline-directed medical therapy. We want to get them on the right guideline therapy so that the likelihood of them returning to hospital is much lower than what the current stats show.
Right. Now, obviously, it's a much bigger TAM as far as heart failure, and so it's a bigger market and a bigger margin as well there. How does Echo IQ then make sure, are you going to go after both treatment stenosis and heart failure at the same time? How do you make sure that the company is being laser focused, if you will?
Yeah, so the important thing with this is it's the same customer group, right? So we're
Exactly.
not going to see another, the call point is exactly the same, and it's just a very specific diagnosis for another condition. So the way that we'll be laser focused is the first 12 months, our focus is purely on aortic stenosis. That's commercialization focused.
Right.
During that time, the medical and scientific team will work on getting heart failure cleared for FDA. The beauty about this is about the approach is for heart failure, it'll be a streamlined process because we'll be our own predicate device in this instance. And also the way that we validated our AI and our technology has already been accepted by the FDA. So we anticipate a much streamlined approach for heart failure. And
Right.
then once that kicks in, it'll be the same customer group. So we'll go, hey, up until now, you've used for aortic stenosis. Surprise, surprise, you've now got a heart failure. And the diagnosis is just when they suspect a heart condition, a physician will normally say, I would like to get an echo for Greg due to
Yes.
suspected aortic stenosis or due to suspected heart failure. And so it's a very specific measurement that they can do.
Got it. Okay. Dion, I know it's a very busy day over there, so I may just move it to Q&A if that's okay with you.
Cool.
Okay, I'll start out here. Anybody that wants to just put it in the chat or WhatsApp me. Or the one message is are you receiving any bid approaches from other drug companies? Obviously,
So I can say this. We in discussion with a number of drug companies, right?
right,
It's no secret that the way you make money is increase the diagnosis. So we in advanced discussions with a number of drug companies. This will be a good outcome for a drug company to be able to help diagnose more patients. But there's no signed contract. Obviously, we're having confidential conversations,
Yeah, sure.
and that's ongoing. But I can say that we are speaking to three of the four largest heart failure drug manufacturers currently.
Right, not surprising. And the next question, I suppose, the follow-on is Edward Life Sciences, which it's in the public domain that you have a transaction, a deal with them as well. How are they assisting, if at all?
At this stage, the agreement we had with them was purely for the clinical side of it.
Right.
So it was purely to help do the clinical study. So that's where that agreement ended at that stage. There was no
Okay.
ongoing commitment after that. But are we speaking to valve companies as well? The answer is the same as the one for the drug companies. We're speaking to a number of the large heart valve companies for the same reason, right? They need to find the right patients to put their valves in.
Right. And, for people that don't know, Edwards, Medtronic, Johnson Johnson, their Cordis division. So those are the big ones. And it's a very tight market, but about a $10 billion market. So certainly good, sizable for sure. Next one, how is your funding for the next 6 months?
We've just raised just I think over $7.5 million. So we're really well suited for the next 12 to 18 months. We won't have any capital requirements for the next 12 to 18 months.
Right.
Good runway, and we should have some commercial returns during that time as well. But we've just finished an oversubscribed round, maybe about a month ago, I think.
Right. And another question, I'm not sure. Dustin Haynes, where is he based?
He's based in Arizona, so currently
Okay.
he's actually based in Hong Kong. So
Okay.
because of his commitments, he is based in Hong Kong. But his home base, where his home is in Arizona. That's where his family lives. And so I think it'll be good for him to be able to spend some time with the family because he's been away for quite some time just commuting. So he's based in Arizona.
Right. And he's certainly going to do a weather upgrade. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, any plans for a US listing?
That's a really interesting question. And I wish we had our Andrew Grover on the call, who's our current exec chairman, right? This is something that's been discussed internally quite a few times. I
Right.
don't think that they've landed anywhere yet, but
Yeah.
so the answer right now is no. But has it been discussed? Absolutely, it's been discussed internally, and that's something that the board will decide if that makes
Yeah.
sense at the time. And I'm sure Dustin will be quite instrumental with guiding us around that, whether it's will make business sense for us to do so. But I think it's a little bit too early to say whether that's going to be a done deal right now.
Okay. And someone's asking me a follow-up question on this, which is obviously related, which is that are you attending any US conferences to engage with US and US investors?
We're not attending investor conferences at this stage. What we are attending is industry conferences. So the next one
Okay.
that we'll be attending is RSNA. So that's a big conference in Chicago from the 1st until the 5th of December. A number of the partnerships that we speak to, that's where those discussions typically take place. So we'll be heading over to the US to support that conference. And then we go to all the big conferences, as you know, the American College of Cardiology. We go to the European Society of Cardiology. So most of those big companies that attend will also have a venture arm
Right.
that look at any good investments at the same time. So kind of two birds with one stone for attending those conferences. But they're not specific investor conferences; they're more industry conferences.
Okay. And then someone else is asking, would you anticipate receiving some contracts in the next 6 months?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Dion, that is all I have for right now. Disregard that last one there. That doesn't matter. Um, Everybody, thank you very much for joining on short notice. If you do have any follow-up questions, just let me know. Dion, you're always very, very helpful. But again, in conclusion, it's really great to see a company that's helping people and also making us money at the same time, frankly, which is going to lower my heart risk.
That's the plan. That's the plan for everyone. So, just from our side, Greg, thank you to everyone that's currently supporting the stock. And we'll certainly be sure to provide continuous updates. The hard work starts now, but we're very excited at this stage to be in this position. So, thank you for your time and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dion. Be well.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.